Adam Smith. You've heard the name, right? And you probably know the big idea, the invisible hand. He's basically the poster boy for capitalism, the guy who supposedly said greed is good. But what if I told you that whole image is kind of, well, a caricature, and that his real ideas are way more complex and, honestly, a lot more interesting? Okay, let's dive in and see what's really going on with Adam Smith.
So first up, this title, The Father of Capitalism. It makes him sound like he was just a simple cheerleader for the free market, no questions asked. But Smith was a moral philosopher first. He was deeply, deeply concerned with how societies could be not just rich, but also decent and fair. So today, we're going to peel back the layers on this guy.
And to really get Smith, you have to place him in his time. He was born in 1723, right in the heart of the Scottish Enlightenment. And here's the first big surprise for a lot of people. His first major book wasn't about economics at all. It was called The Theory of Moral Sentiments, a deep dive into human ethics. And get this, it was a full 17 years before he published the book that would change everything, The Wealth of Nations. That tells you right there that all his economic ideas, they were built on a solid foundation of moral philosophy.
All right, so let's tackle the myth head on. You know, the simplified, almost cartoon version of Adam Smith that so many of us have in our heads.
The myth basically goes like this. Smith believed that the engine of society should just be pure, unchecked selfishness. That if everyone just acts on their own greed, some kind of magic happens and it all works out for the best. But that is a massive, massive oversimplification of what he was actually arguing.
So to find the real Smith, we've got to ask the same question he did. Forget about individuals for just a second. How do entire nations get wealthy?
See, back in 1776, asking this was pretty radical. The common belief was that a nation's wealth was just its pile of gold and silver. Smith said, nope, you've got it all wrong. He argued a nation's true wealth is its ability to produce stuff, the goods and services its people create. And he pointed to two key things that unlock that amazing productive power. First on the list is the division of labor, and his example of a pin factory just nails it. Think about it. One worker trying to make a single pin from scratch might struggle to make even one in a whole day. But what if you break that job down? One person pulls the wire, another straightens it, a third cuts it, and so on. Suddenly, a small team where everyone has one tiny specialized task can churn out thousands of pins every single day. It's an absolute explosion of productivity. Okay, so that's how it's done. But what's the motivation? What makes it all happen? This is Smith's second big insight. It's not about people being nice. It's about self-interest. The butcher doesn't sell you that steak because he's a great guy. He does it to make a living. You get your dinner, he gets your money, and then he can go buy the things that he needs. It's a two-way street. And this is the magic of it right here. When you have millions of people all pursuing their own interests, trying to build a better life for their family, trying to grow their business, they end up, without even planning to, serving the needs of everyone else. The good of the whole community comes about not from some grand top-down plan, but from all these individual actions bubbling up from the bottom.
And this, of course, brings us to maybe the most famous, and definitely the most misunderstood, metaphor in the history of economics, the invisible hand.
You know, it's funny, Smith only used this phrase a few times, but it perfectly captured this powerful idea. The invisible hand is just a metaphor for how the market kind of organizes itself. The forces of supply and demand, of people wanting to buy things and other people wanting to sell them, it all guides resources to where they're needed most. It's like an orchestra playing in tune without a conductor telling everyone what to do.
So, for this whole self-regulating system to work its magic, Smith argued the government should mostly just keep its hands off. This is that principle of laissez-faire, which just means let it be. But, and this is a really, really huge but, limited government did not mean no government to him. See, Smith wasn't some anarchist. He was a realist. He knew the market needed a strong foundation to even work. He laid out three absolutely critical jobs for the government. First, defend the country from invasion. Obvious, right? Second, create a reliable justice system to enforce contracts and protect property. You can't have a market without rules. And third, and this one is super important, provide public works. Things like roads, bridges, even education. Stuff that helps everybody, but isn't really profitable for one company to build on its own. For Smith, this wasn't messing with the market. It was building the stage for the market to perform on. For a good 100 years or so, Smith's ideas were hugely influential. But they also drew some really powerful critics, people who saw a much darker side to this new world of industrial capitalism. And Smith's most famous critic, of course, was Karl Marx. He looked at the same world and saw something totally different. Take that pin factory. Where Smith saw a miracle of efficiency, Marx saw something deeply dehumanizing. He argued that when you break work down into these tiny, mindless, repetitive tasks, you rob the worker of any creativity or connection to what they're making. You basically turn a human being into a cog in a machine.
And what about self-interest? To Smith, it was the engine that drove everything forward. To Marx, it was the engine of exploitation. He argued that the capitalist self-interest, that relentless drive for profit, was built on paying workers less than the value they actually created, and that this would inevitably lead to wealth getting concentrated in the hands of just a few people.
And the critiques didn't stop with Marx. Fast forward to the 20th and 21st centuries, and even mainstream economists started pointing out the cracks in Smith's vision. Nobel Prize winner Joseph Stiglitz put it pretty bluntly. He said the reason the invisible hand often seems invisible is that it's often not there. So what doesn't always work?
Well, modern economists call these market failures. Turns out Smith himself was worried about monopolies, which can just stomp out competition and jack up prices. Then you've got something called asymmetric information. Just think of a used car salesman who knows the car he's selling you is a piece of junk, but you don't. That's not a level playing field. And finally, markets are just not very good at providing public goods, like clean air or national defense. We all benefit from them, but since no single company can make a profit selling them, they often don't get created unless the government steps in.
So with all these critiques piling up over the years, where does that leave Adam Smith today? Is he just some relic from a bygone era?
You see this question online all the time. Is there any real point in reading Smith today, or is it all just outdated? It's a totally fair question.
And the answer really is a bit complicated. Look, we now know that those perfect, ideal conditions where the invisible hand works flawlessly are pretty rare in the real world. But that doesn't make Smith irrelevant, not at all. His core insights about productivity, about incentives, about how markets work, they literally created the foundation for all modern economics. He was the one who started the conversation by asking the right questions, even if we're all still arguing about the answers.
And that really brings us to the final and most important takeaway. The debate that Smith started over 200 years ago is still the central economic debate we're having today. The question was never markets or government. It's about finding the right balance between the two. What is the proper role for the invisible hand of the market, and where do we need the visible guiding hand of government? That's the big question Smith left us with, and it's one we are all still trying to figure out.